Everybody, welcome to Paranormal Into the Night on the Late Late Horror Show. Let's do the intro and then right to Cristina Gomez. Here we go.
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
It's always getting crazier out there, but hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Into the Night. This is going to be a fun show. I think kind of a casual show, but we're going to hit on a lot of different topics. Hello, everybody in chat. Connie Clary, Ginger, Dave Plouffe. Hey. What's going on, my friend? Who else is here? I think it's going to take a while for people to get in here. RTN, what's going on, Denny? Kathy Evans, good to see ya. And feel free, if you got a question throughout this interview, please give a let me know in the chat. They are all fun, Dino. Thank you, Dave Plouffe. Of course they are. We've been doing this for how many years now? Geez, I think it's been 7 or 8 years. Anyways, who is Cristina Gomez? I came across her on a channel on YouTube, but who is she? Cristina Gomez is a video content creator and podcaster who brings a young and fresh perspective to the UFO and paranormal research fields. She is a proud Gen Z Latina, being of Venezuelan heritage. She has produced and presented over 200 shows for her YouTube channel and podcast platform while attending university at a full-time student, pursuing a listen, she's into a whole mess of paranormal. And she hosts with like Jimmy Church and other stuff. Listen, I just can't read all that. I've got issues. I got dyslexia. Hey, Cristina, what's going on?
Hey there, how's it going?
Okay. I was going to read the entire press kit, but listen, probably better off just talking to you about it, right?
Well, I also have dyslexia, so I understand what you're going through on a very personal level.
Thank you. The more people than I realize have dyslexia. It's weird. It's a weird thing. It's not the usual dyslexia that is out there, but yes, it's a form of dyslexia. Sometimes I mispronounce words. I'll see them and it gets me confused. So yes, it's hard to read, but I power on like we're supposed to do. So I came across you on the YouTube channel. The show that I really love is the Strange and Weird News. I mean, that kind of caught me, and I really enjoyed it. And again, I would tell anybody here, go to the description below, hit her link to her website, and it takes you everywhere. And listen, she's everywhere. If there's a podcast out there, she's on it, right? I looked at your website.
I try.
I looked at your website, and up there where it's got links to all the podcasts, there's like 50 of them up there. So you
I try to be everywhere.
Right. You did everything right, it seems, so far. So congratulations on that and your success and all the fans that you got. So
oh my gosh, thank you so much. As for Weekly Strange News, it's actually the most popular show on my channel, which is under my name, Cristina Gomez. I do 3 a week. One of them is Shifting the Paradigm, is where I interview. Originally, it was only interviewing UFO researchers and enthusiasts. But then as I started my research into UFOs, it branched out into the paranormal. It branched out to the unexplained and even cryptids, kind of where I am right now. And I'm like, how did I get here? And then I have another show called Mysteries with a History, where Jimmy Church from Fade to Black hosts with me, and we cover a specific topic every single week and we go in depth. Like, for instance, last Thursday was the mysteries of Australia. So there we spoke about UFO sightings, paranormal encounters, weird and strange disappearances, and things like that. But we've also covered cases such as like the Aztec crash, Colares, Brazil, which is one of my favorite all-time cases. But I am
what is
definitely
that? What is
The
that?
Colares, Brazil incident. Do you want me to tell it to you?
Yeah,
My
yes, let's
favorite
start
case.
right off, and tell me a
Okay.
little bit about that, and then I'll ask some other questions, but go ahead.
All right, fantastic. So this case took place in 1977, and it's actually a UFO story. And so what happened back in Colares, Brazil, which is a small fishing town, is they allegedly, and there are witness accounts, you can find about half of the documentation on the Black Vault, which was released through FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act back in like the early 2000s. But what ended up happening was for 6 months, a UFO flap, which is a consistent sighting, took place every single night from about 7 to 8 p.m., where these craft would beam these lights, and it would puncture people through the skin. For the women in the chest area, and it was 3 puncture wounds, and for men in the jugular area, also in the thigh as well. And actually, this is the first case that I've ever come across where people actually died due to a UFO encounter. And it was getting so fearful for these town folk, again, because this happened for 6 months, this is documented,
Wow.
that the mayor of this town, Colares, called the capital, Brasilia, and he said, "Please send help. My people are mortified. They're walking in groups. They're sleeping all in the same house. They will not go out by themselves. There's too much fear happening. Please bring the military." So, when the military came, the townfolk expected there to be weapons, cannons, I mean, everything to keep them protected. But instead, they brought papers, pencils, and cameras. And this ended up being called Operation Saucer, Operación Plato, where they just documented for about 3 to 4 months on all of these encounters. They collected witness accounts. They took videos, photographs, and drawings. However, currently only the drawings are available and some of the witness testimonies, again, that were released through FOIA. And what's really interesting about this story, actually a few cases, a few instances that are really interesting. But one in particular is the captain of Operation Saucer was Captain Urange Lima. And he did not come out about his story until 1997 when he spoke to the only UFO researchers at the time in Brazil under the UFO magazine. And there, not only was his entire interview recorded, and you can find it online, but he also did drawings as well. And he mentioned that a lot of his men, including himself, had not only encountered UFOs in the sky, but he himself had a very close encounter. And he stated in the interview that he did in 1997, which he didn't speak for about 20 years, that one night when he was in his room in this small town in Colares, that there was this small extraterrestrial that was in a gray suit and in a helmet, and it hugged him from behind. And he said in a robotic Portuguese accent, "Don't worry, we're not going to harm you. Just relax." And then it disappeared. And what's
Hmm.
interesting about this case is I've come across a lot of UFO encounters. I've covered a lot of stories on my show and have done extensive research. But it's not necessarily common to hear someone state that when they were in communication with an extraterrestrial, at least allegedly, that it's coming out in a in a robotic voice.
Mhm.
Usually it's telepathic from what I've come across. Of course, there are some that are in conversation you and myself, but for the
Right.
most part it's telepathic. So in this case, this was telepathic, but in a broken robotic Portuguese accent, which is really strange.
Hmm.
But what's also very odd about this story, and I'm almost done, I promise.
No,
I'm
it's
doing
alright.
a fast summary of this one because there's
It's
so
okay.
much to it.
Yeah.
But there was only one clinic in this town, and the doctor of this clinic had people coming in every single day with just like these weird puncture wounds, and she had no idea. At this time, she was not a believer in UFOs until she had her own sighting. But prior to that, with all of these people coming in and out of her clinic, she believed that they all had mass hysteria, that they were all crazy seeing UFOs every single night, where this beam of light shines on them and they are paralyzed and they freak out from that instance. And they come in telling her these stories, and she's like, what are you talking about? You are absolutely delusional. And she had her very own sighting. This was right before the Brazilia's military came into this town. As soon as they entered Colares, one of the first stops they made was at the clinic, and they told the doctor, anyone else that comes in, you're going to tell them they have mass hysteria. That's it. That's all you're
Okay.
going to tell them, because obviously they're not seeing UFOs. And if they are, you better tell them that they're not. And at this point, she already had her encounter, which is also documented. She gave a very thorough interview back, I want to say, in the 80s or 90s. And there's
Mm.
a whole book on it. But she stated, I can't lie to my patients like that. And the military said, if you don't, there will be consequences.
Of
But
course.
of course,
I
that's
mean,
the typical
yeah,
narrative.
yeah.
But from there, she was still getting people coming in, still seeing puncture wounds. But there was actually 2 instances where a person came in completely paralyzed. So someone had to bring a patient into her clinic, and she couldn't do anything about it. So she calls the capital and says, "Hey, I'm bringing someone into your clinic. Like, be prepared." So when this patient is in the car, this person can't move at all. Totally paralyzed, but like stiff like metal. And I want to say about 24 hours, 48 hours later, this person passed. When the doctor asked for the documentation, the death certificate of how this person passed, it she wasn't able to receive that information. It became
Mm.
classified. And this didn't happen once, but twice. And this is why the Colares, Brazil incident that took place in 1977 is one of my all-time favorite cases, because it's one of the very few where you have hundreds of available witness testimonies and drawings created by the military and by people of that town that were collected and have been released by the Brazilian government.
Yeah, listen, I can't believe I've never heard of this case.
Surprisingly, it's not that popular. A lot of people don't know about it, and hey, I get it. But once you
Right.
hear it, you're like, this
No.
story is insane.
Right, and that's one of the things I was gonna ask you. I was gonna say, you said some have died. I mean, what was the evidence behind their death? But again, there is none because the military, and that's the downside to all of this what we're trying to get to, is that it's always hidden by the military or the government, and it just kind of sucks, right? But the puncture wounds, any pictures of the puncture wounds, did you come across any of that in the book, or
Yes,
any?
the
Okay.
images are available from one woman in particular. If you type in Colares, Brazil, 1977, you will find an image of a woman. It's a black and white photo with puncture wounds right in the chest area.
Okay, well, boy, yeah, no, very interesting. Anytime you got hundreds of people witnessing something, and you said
Mhm.
over a 6-month period, and then
Every single
military,
night.
yeah, it's just that's just unreal, and I never heard of it. Hello again, RTN, Ginger. Hello, Travis. Hello, Rich Cat. Good to see you, Grandmaster. Oh, whatever, 86. Grandmaster Gav, 86. What's going on, my friend? Good to have you here. So yes, let me ask you first, because, and again, I love your channel, love your show.
Thank you.
Haven't really dove into the podcast yet side of things because I'm a YouTube guy and everything's visual for me. But I'm loving it. So I would say link is down below, you guys. Go check it out. How did you start off getting into the paranormal? Did something happen? in your life, or did you just kind of say paranormal's kind of cool, mysteries are cool, I'm going to do a show on it? Anything happen in your life?
Well, I was always interested in the unexplained since I was a child. My father actually exposed me to the Twilight Zone. You're probably
Nice.
familiar with it. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. It's
yeah.
amazing. It's one of my all-time favorite TV shows next to Father Ted and SpongeBob. But with the
Father Ted.
Twilights, oh,
Okay.
it's an Irish sitcom from the
Yes, I
1990s.
know. I know. I love
You know
it.
it? It's
Yes.
one of
Faulty
my
Towers, Father Ted.
yes.
Listen, I'm a Brit guy, so I love all that stuff. So, yes, very, very
Oh,
much so. In
love it.
Twilight Zone, there's not a bad episode.
There there's a few
Or
I'm not so
okay,
fond of, but
okay. Well, I'd like to ask you, can you off the top of your head, which one's bad?
The
Or
one that
that's
the one I wasn't too fond of, where it's like this kind of woman, she's mute and she had like this robot alien come into her house, and it's like this whole like tension build up thing, and this
yes.
robot's in the attic. I just didn't find that one in like
Okay.
interesting, but it's very well done. Don't get me wrong, and
Yes,
acting
yes,
without speaking during this time,
right.
fantastic. But there's so many
Listen,
other
I love
ones
that
like How to
one.
Serve Man. Really?
Oh, yeah. Wait, go ahead. Is that a bad one?
No, How to Serve Man is, like, one of the best ones.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen, that one's a good one. Anyways, Zusha K, hello, WWM, hello. Good to see you guys. So again, let's get back to it. You love Twilight Zone.
Right,
Uh,
so with the Twilight Zone, what's so interesting about it and how I got interested in it is because it was touching all of these really bizarre mysteries, and what's really fantastic about that show in particular is that they're very open-ended endings, if that makes
yeah,
sense. It's like
yeah.
you can continue to finish the story with your imagination compared to the more present
Well,
TV shows that we have where when it ends, right? That's
right.
it. No,
Yeah.
nothing interesting. So it was with that that began to pique my interest. As soon as I entered college, I moved far away from home. Thank you. I moved far away from home, and I had a lot of free time on my hands at that time. I don't even know what free time is anymore. I do not have that. But when
Listen
I
here, lady. I hear you 100%.
it's a luxury now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But with that, I created a YouTube channel. It was actually a very originally I started making music. It was
Okay.
like a sleep ambient music. Now I have my own channel for that called Cosmic Portals. But from
Nice.
there, I started collecting UFO sightings across the internet. And I was so tired of the argument stating that, oh, every UFO is a blob. The footage is blurry. It's shaky. Like these videos are absolute garbage. And I'm like,
Yeah,
dude, I feel you on that, but I want to change. I want to change that conversation. So I
yeah,
went ahead and started collecting as much as I could, placing it in software, attempting to stabilize it, zoom it in, add filters if it needed it, in the sense of attempting to see if there was exhaust that your average filter doesn't find and things like this.
yeah.
And then I was getting really interested in this and I'm like, you know what? It's time to have these conversations with people because when I attempted to bring it onto campus, I'm
Mhm.
like, "Hey guys, let's talk about like the concept of UFOs. Are they real? Are they not? What's the science aspect? Is there a historical aspect? I know nothing, but I want to learn." They look at me, they look at their watch and they're like, "Christina, it's 8 a.m."
Right, you need to get
And
to class.
yeah, and I'm not under some kind of substance, so we're not having this conversation right now. And
Right.
of course, I was incredibly disappointed in that. And I'm like, no, I want to have this conversation for real right here, right now. Well, I had so many questions. I ended up creating my very first show, Shifting the Paradigm, where I started interviewing UFO researchers and enthusiasts to really get a grasp on this conversation, to really sink my teeth in to what's going on because there's so many aspects to it that I didn't expect starting out, especially because everyone knows the story of Roswell. It took place in 1947, right? Okay,
Yep.
cool, Roswell. But there's so many of these other cases that aren't really spoken about, or even the scientific aspect of so many so many groups have been created, both funded by civilians and by the government to research UFOs. And I'm like, what? That's insane. Well,
Yeah, I
as
mean,
my
that
re-
alone is
it,
evidence, but people kind of poo-poo that too, so
exactly. But then
yeah.
it was through speaking to more people, having my mind open consistently, I began to realize that there is a convergence between the UFO phenomenon and the paranormal. And then that's how that little
Mhm.
pathway started going. And the paranormal is a fascinating conversation altogether. And I can see why you talk about it all the time because it is mind blowing and it's really classified in the aspect of the unexplained. But then you hear time and time again from paranormal investigators the paranormal is just normal, right? It's
Right,
the
right.
normal that's kind of paranormal.
Eh, right,
They're
right,
not
right.
wrong.
Listen, it's the paranormal field can get very, very confusing. I think
Oh,
that's
without
why
a
a lot
doubt.
of people kinda just put it off and just dismiss it and go on with their life because, we're saying UFOs right now, but with just UFOs alone, you can throw in Bigfoot, you can throw in, time slips, time travel,
Portals. Yeah.
portals, all kinds of different paranormal topics that just all flow into one thing. And that's where you start getting confused by going, well, how the heck does that relate to that? And I think this is all just a bunch of BS. But if you get down to the nitty gritty, especially if we're just talking UFOs, UFO crashes, UFO sightings, a lot of times the big cases have an awful lot of factual information behind it, credible witnesses, credible people. And even then, people kind of dismiss it. And listen, I'm a skeptic to a point. I'm like, I want to see it. Am I going to 100% believe that it's going on? 100%? No, I want to see one. I keep saying it every day. I want one to land in my front yard, Take me for a ride. Get me off this planet we call Earth, right? But
I'm in.
exactly. So I'm sure you agree with me, right?
Absolutely. Being a skeptic is incredibly important, but
Mm,
more importantly, to be an open minded skeptic
yes.
because it is totally dangerous to believe everything that you hear, to think that everything that you read is true. That's not the case. A lot of people in this field or in any field are attempting to make a buck, right? And there's nothing wrong with that if you're truthful,
Yeah.
but it is wrong if you are lying. So that is something that kind of bothers me in general, is just
Yeah.
fake information and trying to make money off of it. But you have to be a skeptic to to separate the wheat from the chaff. And with that, it's very different from debunkers as well, another side of the spectrum where they won't believe anything. They already have a preconceived notion. What they believe is absolutely true. Nothing can change their mind. That's also very dangerous. So you can't be believing everything, but you can't be debunking everything. You got to take that middle path of
Right.
being an open-minded skeptic. And that is the best, in my opinion, that is
Yeah.
the best path that you can take, but also one that won't leave you with these emotions of expectations or even those emotions of disappointment because you're not expecting anything. You're just stating being open-minded enough, but to still question the situation.
Yes. And I think also that is why you need to do your research because with research comes the facts. And
That's right.
then you could determine in your own mind if you kind of tend to believe it or say, hey, there's something to this. It's another reason why I like the older cases prior to the internet and all that stuff because what are we going through right now, Christina? And we'll get to that, Connie, real quick. Uh, but what are we going through right now? I just seen a TikTok video that had 600,000 views. It was a group of people going, "Oh my God, there's an angel. An angel is spotted in the clouds, and it's an angel." and it disappears back into the clouds. Very well done. Do I believe that that's an angel? No, it's on TikTok. Even if
Yeah.
it was real, the environment we live in right now just makes it very difficult to
Oh, yeah.
distinguish what is real and what could possibly be something paranormal, right?
Absolutely. And with the time period that we're in, CGI is so easy to use now.
I can do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyone can do it. So
Yeah.
for myself in particular, I get so many videos that are fake. And then I get so many videos that are just a blob that are sent to me by fans and by listeners and by those that want me to look into this. And I respect that and I try my best, but I get so many. So
Yeah.
difficult to keep up along with doing several shows a week, being a full-time student, having a job, and trying to eat 3 meals a day, right? There's
Right.
just there's just not enough time in the day to do all these things, also including making music as well. But
Jeez.
with with what I've seen
Yeah.
is what's really important to look at to help you better decipher on if a video is real or not is listening to the expressions of the people around them, those that are recording the video. For instance, if it's just a singular person recording something, you're already kind of hesitant, right?
Yeah.
But if there's a bunch of other people that are uh, in frame that are also seeing this object that are expressing intense excitement, then you're like, okay, that makes more sense. There was actually this one sighting that was recently posted of a UFO, supposedly a UFO. We don't know
Yeah.
for a fact, but that was over a school and all the kids saw it, staff saw it, and they were freaking out. They were yelling, they were screaming, they were excited, they were scared. And then you get these kinds of CGI videos, right? Where these expressions are like, whoa, look at that. Oh, wow, so cool. And you're like, okay, so it's a
Yeah.
little fishy here.
No, listen, that's what goes on. WWM, when does she find time to sleep? Listen, you've been on this channel how long now? Listen, when you're doing shows all the time, it's hard to find time to sleep. Mike
Oh,
Barrett
yeah.
did see a UFO. But let's get to Connie's question, even though I have a million things I got written down. But Connie asks you thoughts about the Kecksburg UFO incident.
Yeah, so the Kecksburg UFO incident took place in 1965 in Pennsylvania. And I covered this on my show regarding crash retrieval. So there's quite a few cases like this one. And what's interesting about this case, which there is a statue in this small town of Kecksburg. It's the shape of an acorn with hieroglyphics on it. But when you first look at it, it really does look like graffiti. So you're
Mhm.
like, why would someone vandalize this statue? But then you kind of take a closer look and you're like, "Oh, okay, it's actually what was believed to be seen when this acorn-shaped UFO crashed." And w my thoughts on this, something that I find interesting about this story in particular is that this happened in a very small town. There were, quite a few people who saw this craft in the sky. One house in particular saw it crash, and very quickly, at least allegedly, the military came in really fast. They put a tarp over it and they took it off so quick. The people that supposedly saw this craft crash, the military came in, they interrogated them and said you didn't see anything. This is also another thing that we see consistently with a handful of UFO crashes, to be very specific, crashes where it's collected within a few hours. People that have supposedly seen it get interrogated either by the military or the men in black as well, which that's a whole nother phenomenon altogether.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So I think it's one that's worth looking into. It's a part of the UFO history. And for those that are interested in researching the UFO phenomenon, but the more historical aspect, it is a case worth looking into.
Yes. So there you go, Connie. And again, I keep pushing it, but all of these stories and many, 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 many more can be found at her YouTube channel. And go check it out. along with the link down below to her website. It's down there. Go check it out. You won't be disappointed if you're into the paranormal and all this good stuff, mysteries as well. There's another subject, Black Roses. Good to see you. There's another subject I'd like to get into with you because you've even interviewed the owner of Skinwalker Ranch. But listen, I've been doing podcasts on the paranormal for about 8 years, so I've talked to a lot of people, even Art Bell himself. This is
No
kind of where.
way. I almost
Look,
spit my water. I'm like, wow.
can I tell you a secret?
Well, it's not a secret, but I'm all ears.
It's not a secret no more because I've told everybody because I thought it was so cool. Art Bell has always been and always will be the greatest paranormal, interviewer, talk show host ever in my eyes. Unless one comes along like myself or you, I don't know.
There you go.
But okay, when everything went awry and he came to Midnight in the Desert, he was trying to get people, he was trying to get guests. So he was reaching out a little bit more. So he finally answered me because I messaged him a couple times. We were friends on Facebook. And we were talking the night before he did the "I'm losing my mind" line. Okay. So we were talking the night before and he goes, well, yeah, give a call tomorrow night if you want to. That's all I'll say. So if you look on YouTube and you see the video of just put vampire Art Bell in the search bar. And there's a guy with, with fangs and all that. It's the "I'm losing my mind" line. It's me calling in, and I've lost my mind because I was bitten by something. And I think I put a very good performance in there. Everybody, I think a lot of the comments say, this is the same guy as the Area 51 caller. But no, it's me. It's me. And it's just a highlight of my life because I'm part of Art Bell history. I just think it's the coolest thing. But anyways, I don't know how we got sidetracked, but check that out. So
Yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch, you've talked to the owner. Listen, I know it's ongoing. I know there's even a TV show. We know how it this past season ended. Lots of crazy stuff going on there. But what are your thoughts? I mean, talk about it a little bit. Like the biggest thing for me was when I heard when Bob Bigelow owned it and
Right.
the camera supposedly caught something invisible going up the two towers and taking the poles and
Yes.
taking the camera. But anyways, talk a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch.
So Skinwalker Ranch is located in the Uinta Basin, and it's a hotspot, not just for UFOs, but the
Hundreds
paranormal
of
and
years.
supposedly even cryptids as well. And what's interesting about that location is the legend behind it, where you have the Navajo and the Utes. They got into a war, and one tribe cursed the other, making them turn into skinwalkers. Now, the legend of skinwalkers, it's a very dark one. It's not one that First Nation tribes like to talk about because they believe that if you speak about skinwalkers or even do the research on them, you are inviting them into your life. And this is wholeheartedly believed. I also interviewed retired Navajo Ranger John Dover, who has done extensive research on these cryptids. And that's kind of how that name, got into Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
But with this location, when I was able to interview the owner, Brandon Fugel, but also the superintendent, Thomas Winterton, they helped me with a few answers, but it just led to more questions. This location kind of got famous originally with George Knapp. He released his first book telling all of these stories regarding allegedly dire wolves, which are an extinct type of wolf where the original family had supposedly shot and it didn't bleed or die, which is insane because they shot this dire wolf like 3 or 4 times and it wouldn't bleed or anything like that. Later on, people believe that to have potentially been a skinwalker because how the legend goes is that these type of evil people, they
Mm.
collect animal skins, and when they put it on top of themselves, they turn into that creature, and they
Right.
can't die. They can only die if you say their original name or if you use a very, I think if you burn their bones. with a certain type of wood and white sage, I believe.
Mm.
But with this entire location, you had that one family, live in it, tell their stories, things like that. Then you had the Bigelow era, where they did extensive research and there were a few details leaked, but a lot of that information is still classified, where there were two scientists who supposedly saw portals. And in one portal, they saw an environment on the other side that was completely different. There was, John Dover had told me a story where during the Bigelow era, there was a Bigfoot that walked out of a portal. So
Right.
there have been UFO sightings both during the Bigelow era and during Brandon's era as well. So you're dealing with portals, UFOs, cryptids. There have been stories of ghosts or shadow people, which
Yeah.
they have been seen in the homesteads, and there are several throughout all of the eras that have been documented. You're seeing extinct creatures such as the direwolf. There are believed to be sounds coming from underground. There are electromagnetic anomalies. There have been sudden sickness symptoms that we've seen in several seasons of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. One in particular being with Travis Taylor, Dr. Travis Taylor, who had opened that little lid to the well, right?
Yeah.
And he got radiation poisoning. Then there's
Mhm.
the hitchhiker effect. And Thomas Winterton, the superintendent, had mentioned that he himself was affected by the hitchhiker effect. And that in particular, that interview was a really, really shocking one, and actually really
Mm.
blew my mind at the end, because he stated that he has his camera equipment had gone out because he had to put camera equipment around his house because of the hitchhiker effect.
Explain the
He's
hitchhiker effect.
right. So the hitchhiker effect is kind of where you get an attachment or a parasite from a location or potentially an entity that latches onto you, and then you
Right.
take it home. And this can affect your energy. It can affect your moods. It can also affect literal objects in your environment as well. And it can be really scary if you don't know what's going on or even how to rid yourself of it. There
Right.
have been a lot of people that have walked onto the ranch that have dealt with the hitchhiker effect. I had specifically asked Brandon, and I said, "Did you ever invite anyone back from the Bigelow era to the ranch?" And he said, "Yes, I invited them, and they wholeheartedly denied it. They do not want to go back to the ranch." Same with crew members that have done several seasons. That they've done on the History Channel.
Yeah.
There are crew members that don't wanna come back because 'cause they've had issues. Then there's even radiation spikes in the area that are extremely dangerous. There's poltergeist activity. It can even attack you physically as well, both with the hitchhiker effect, but also in, Skinwalker Ranch. And I do have a playlist on my channel of those interviews, and, more will be coming soon for updates, which is gonna be really interesting. But
Nice.
what I really like about this team in particular, the new era, the Brandon Fugel era, is that they're making their information public. All of the
Yeah,
previous
I'm just yeah, I'll interrupt you real quick, you can
No,
continue, but
please.
yeah, Bob Bigelow, that was the one thing,
Yeah.
he created all those investigators, the National Institute of Discovery Science, NIDS, and, all of that information, everything they had, and they didn't release it.
Mm-mm.
It's like, okay, so what was the ultimate goal here? I mean, I don't understand. So anyways,
Exactly.
continue.
No,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, and it is something worth mentioning, and that's why I'm so happy with this new era, the Brandon Fugel era, is because he is making his information public. Everything that happens on the ranch, you are able to get access to those cameras 24/7 through the Skinwalker membership. Yes, it is $7 a month. Yes, that bothers some people, but regardless, that information is publicly available. There has been nobody else that has done anything like that. And all of that money goes straight into the research because Brandon is funding this himself. Yes,
Right.
he's a millionaire, but you're only a millionaire for so long, right?
Right.
This research is really, really expensive with the people with this paying for his team, paying for all the equipment, which they have really high tech expensive stuff, not only through the shows but also in their research that they do off season, which again is 100% publicly available. And that's one thing that Brandon is really proud about, is that he's transparent. There has been no other entity, no other agency, no other anything that is
Mm.
doing what he is. And with this area, Skinwalker Ranch, it's a total money pit, very much like Oak Island, right? All this money's going in. What's coming out? I don't know, but we're looking for those answers. We want to understand what's going on, and Skinwalker Ranch is kind of feeding into that curiosity. I would like to mention there are other places across the globe where that are similar
Same
to
stuff
Skinwalker
happens.
Ranch,
Yeah.
that are these hotspots, except Skinwalker Ranch is the only location on the planet that is getting the scientific research, that is getting the funding, that is getting the attention compared to any other location. And the
Right.
cool thing is about their membership is that you're able to chat with the team like Eric Bard and Dragon, and they do weekly group Q&A streams as well. So it's really cool to get that information and to really feel like you're also part of that team as well. But looking at other locations, I know you have so many questions, but let me just touch on this really fast.
No, you continue. It's nice hearing you talk about all these subjects. So no, you continue on. I'm
Thank
not going
you.
to interrupt you. Go ahead.
There's another really cool place called the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. It's another crazy
I
hotspot.
love that you're bringing up things that I see. Again, I don't hear this from a lot of other people talking about paranormal topics on their shows. There's a million of them on YouTube, and it's always talking about the same old things.
Yeah,
So I love that you're diving into these different things. And
thank
the
you.
the, the thing you're talking about right now, not many people know about, but is very interesting also. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, with the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, it's another hotspot. You're getting UFO sightings, you're getting cryptid sightings, you're getting, did I say paranormal sightings? You're also getting those as well. You're getting everything crazy. And there
Yeah.
has been some research done on it, not as much as Skinwalker Ranch. There have been some books released regarding that area. But one of my favorite stories about the Bridgewater Triangle is actually this alleged mythological cryptid called the Pukwudgie.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
oh,
Go ahead.
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love Pukwudgies so much just because they're super cute sounding. Now they're vicious, they will kill you, they will push you off a cliff, but
Yeah.
just the name, so cuddly. But then you have other hotspots such as the Bradshaw Ranch in West Sedona, which is already believed to have healing properties, have vortexes, a bunch of UFO sightings. There's so many UFO tours in Sedona, Arizona. Well, you also have this really weird hotspot where you're getting cryptid sightings, paranormal sightings, UFO sightings in the Bradshaw Ranch as well, which was privately owned. Then supposedly it was bought by the government, by Arizona State University. And then now it's supposedly public land ish. Meaning like you can walk on the property, no one's going to shoot you kind of
Right.
deal.
Yeah.
But these locations, they have been just touched on. They've only been barely researched. But then I'm bringing back Skinwalker Ranch. They're doing all of this intense research like no other location.
Yeah. No, listen, I hear you. And again, that's the only unfortunate part is, but I get it. I get the monthly fee. I understand it. In the world we're living in today, everything costs money, even for a millionaire. But the people who are diehard debunkers will go, dude's charging for his website, you know. But like you said, you have access to everything. You can record whatever you're seeing from the cameras itself. So I think the point is for people out there to gather as much information for them as well, to prove some of these things, because you never know what's going to pop up on the camera. So I
Exactly,
get it.
that's the
Yeah,
exciting part, and there's
yeah,
also a public log as well, so I'm a part of that, obviously, because I love
right,
all the stories of Skinwalker Ranch. I buy their membership. I personally think it's worth it for
yeah.
me, and I'm a college student. I eat ramen 3 meals a day, it's like 30 cents, yet I can afford
Too
you
much
know?
salt, Christina. Do not put the
You
whole
know,
packet in there. Anyways, go ahead.
I I do, I do.
Okay, I know.
I
You
know,
need
it's
the flavoring.
unfortunate.
I
It's
know.
so good. Creamy chicken, best flavor out there for
Uh,
the
There you go. Yeah.
it is.
No, creamy chicken, number 1.
Number 1.
Although the teriyaki, that's a little bit different because it's got the liquid sauce, but we're veering off paranormal here. That's my favorite, but go ahead.
It is pretty good. Well, as soon as I graduate, I will be on the road doing research, going to Bradshaw Ranch, going to Skinwalker Ranch, to the Bridgewater Triangle. In my motorhome, I am purchasing an RV, hitting all the UFO hotspots, paranormal hotspots,
Nice.
cryptid hotspots, and doing boots on the ground investigations. The last 2 years, I have been what has been classified as an armchair researcher, which has such a negative connotation, but I think it's very important that you have background knowledge of the locations you're going to visit, of safety precautions, and all of
Yeah,
these things before you do boots on the ground investigations, because it's very dangerous to do it blind. It's
right.
also a waste of your time if you don't know what you're looking for the patterns. So I think that for these last 2 years, I have collected a foundation of information to be able to well enough do boots on the ground investigation. Of course, as you know, research never ends. You're gonna keep researching until you cross over, until you're
Yeah,
buried 6 feet deep, right?
yeah.
But it is something that I'm looking forward to. I've been planning it for the last 5 years of getting and purchasing an RV. So I'm excited to graduate this summer, to purchase an RV this summer, and to start a new journey.
Yeah, no, that's so we can look forward to probably a year from now before we start seeing videos of you in an RV, boots on the ground, going to these places. But that's something to look forward to on the channel, right? You're gonna put
Oh
the
yeah.
Oh yeah. No, that's awesome. Hello, Sebastian. Overkill. I think I said hello to you, but no, Sabian Chardon. Sick Pup, what's going on? Everybody go check out the links below. Give the stream a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. But if you're chatting, for sure, listen, you probably deal with the same thing. You get the bots going. Did you have to go to subscriber mode only, or are you still good with leaving your chat go when you're live streaming, Christina?
Yeah, I leave my chat go, but I do have a
Wow.
handful of moderators that take care of the bots.
Oh, but they're still annoying. But anyways,
I
yeah.
know.
Oh, it's crazy. I had to go to subscriber mode, but that kind of
Dang.
stinks. But let's see, where can we go? There's just a ton of different places we can go to with this. I'd like to try to stay on the kind of UFO kind of skinwalker, whatever.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the like alien species that have visited here? Let's just like reptilians. The reptilian species kind of intrigue me. They're evidently living here underground. I can go in depth. I've talked to some people about them in depth, but what are your thoughts on the reptilians that are actually still living here?
So it's a
Oh,
really it's a really interesting conversation to have with others. It's actually not one I've done extensive research on, as I am looking more in the historical and scientific aspect of it, really collecting the data, things that are tangible. However, looking at the reptilian aspect, I am open minded to the possibility. I did do a show of like all the possible, not all, but like a handful of possible alien civilizations that are visiting us, from anecdotal contactee stories that I've come across.
yeah.
Like you have the reptilians, you have the Nordics, you have Greys, and there's probably so many others that I'm skipping right
No, I
now.
know. The list can go on and on and on, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard for me to like to get my head around that. Because it is a really complex conversation, and the only evidence that we have right now supposedly is the contactee stories. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of the I need to see to believe. I have that
Right.
mentality.
See, everything you've kind of gone through the interviews, everything you've researched and everything, you still have to see to believe. Because yes,
Yeah.
alien species, thinking of a reptilian, a lizard-like Gorn from Star Trek coming out
Right.
of the ground, at night, to whatever, it's just amazing. So anyways, we'll move from that subject because there are other subjects I definitely like to, uh, I would like, have you ever heard, I'm sure you've heard of it, the Admiral Byrd story, the Hollow Earth theory, your thoughts on that? Because I just find that fascinating. Listen, there are things on this planet that are in the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean, parts of the earth that create their own light. Okay. And
That's
if
right.
these creatures can create full spectrum light, or plants can create full spectrum light deep within the earth, then you can have a fake sun, but not a fake sun, but a real sun-like substance that can create life. Because what does full spectrum light do? It grows plants, vegetation, water, all of that stuff. So the possibility of this big, huge glowing light, coming in a civilization living in the hollow earth, which you know how big the inside of the earth is. I mean, come on. Your thoughts on that? I'm so fascinated with it.
It's interesting, the Hollow Earth, the Operation High Jump. But I have to stay on the fence. I mean, anything is possible. Look at the concept that you stated about how life can grow anywhere. And I think logically that the universe must be teeming with life. But how much of that is intelligent, I don't know. So I've read those stories regarding Hollow Earth and Admiral Byrd, but I can't really do much with them. I mean,
Right.
how would I set up to prove the Earth is hollow? You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I guess I'm just opening up the imaginations, side of things.
Of
Just like,
course. Well, the
wow.
concept of Hollow Earth, it's supposedly believed to be a paradise. This has been written in a few books across mythology, across the planet, where they believe that those that believe that the earth is hollow, that it is a paradise. Also, in some of the Native American legends as well, they have their own stories of the earth being hollow, which is really interesting. But looking at that, I think if I had to say it, it's potentially more believable than stating that the earth is flat, right?
Ah,
But
yes,
I
yeah.
went there. But looking at Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump, really fascinating. When you're dealing
It's on the
with
list of things I was going to actually maybe ask you if things got tight, but go on.
when we're looking at Antarctica, this is a place to be like, I wanna know more information about. There's
Yeah,
only, I believe, a handful of scientists that are there every single year because the temperatures are extremely cold, which I was shockingly surprised that Mr. Beast, the YouTube creator,
yeah,
went to Antarctica for like what, 50 hours. A little upset, but also good for him.
right,
I didn't watch it because
yeah.
I was upset about it. But aside from that, when we look at the stories of Antarctica, we can look at the Piri Reis map that was created in the 1500s.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that map in particular was Piri Reis had created a map during this time period, and Antarctica had no ice on it. It actually had vegetation, it had animals. And when archaeologists and historians were looking back at this, they're like, how is that even possible? How is this man able to get that information when during his time period, Antarctica was completely frozen? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Supposedly, he had collected maps from what, 500 BC and
Mm.
before and a little bit after, where he was able to create this map that he made public that we have, that we can see now online. Once again, it's called the Piri Reis map. And it showed that Antarctica was once a beautiful landmass with vegetation and animals. Could that have potentially been Atlantis? We can get into that tangent where we have Plato bringing this story to the public of what he wrote about Atlantis, how he got that information. And a lot of people are looking at the Atlantic Ocean because Atlantis, Antarctic, right? Makes sense.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's also new researchers thinking, but what if? What if it's not in the Atlantic Ocean, but it's in Antarctica or it is Antarctica? And then we can look at Operation High Jump. We can look at the alleged encounters that Nazi Germany did with their explorations in Antarctica as well, which again, those are
Mhm.
alleged. But I think what's interesting is that I have spoken to a few people off the record on a side tangent about Bigfoot and if that they migrate around the United States, Canada, and other places through extensive underground tunnel systems. So I found that also really interesting as
Yep.
well. But I guess they would need some kind of like a light source, like you had mentioned a little bit earlier, dealing with under the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Which is where my mind jumped to when I was told this. But then, according to some, there are tunnels that are man made and made by extraterrestrials, like the legend surrounding Mount Shasta in California. So I'm sure that there is something to all of these underground stories. But again, many people have disappeared as well in remote places, in national forests and national parks. And people say that they are all disappearing into underground places. Even Dave Paulides has hinted about these possibilities. And all of these topics that we're talking about today, they're all interconnected in some way.
Oh yeah, listen, you just went to 15 different directions there with disappearing people. And listen, that is a whole stream of its own because you can get into serial killers just getting lost. Is it paranormal? All the things you just said, you know. I find disappearing people and appearing people, which I will be talking about a little bit down the road here because I find that fascinating. Um, what was it? The Man from Ptarmigan. Anyways, lots of very cool stuff. There's probably a couple of calls that would also do know the rights of the kinks. Not sure what you're talking about, Schultze, but anyways. So let's see. You do strange and weird news. What is the strangest thing that you've come across in the weekly segments? Like, what's the one that stands out the most to you, or is there not one?
There's a bunch. There's actually so because the stories that I cover are so bizarrely strange. Along with we also cover UFO sightings of the week, paranormal stories, but they're the ones that probably stick with me the most. The one that I can think of first is dumpling flavored soda. That's currently only sold in Japan right now. That was recently released. And when you open it, it has a hint of vinegar and ginger, like the smell. It's
Oh,
so strange to me.
wow.
Would I try it? Yes, I love dumplings with all of my heart.
Yeah,
Ramen,
yeah.
dumplings, fried rice, egg rolls, I'll eat it all. So good.
Right.
But like in a soda format, it sounds really strange. But one that I covered last week that I found really funny was a story about how two thieves they called 911 to help them steal from a house that they broke into. And the police came. They helped this poor couple, right,
Yeah.
move the things out of the house. And they're like, "Hey, since you're here, can you take us to the airport? We want to go on vacation for the weekend." And the policemen are like, "Yeah, yeah, we'll take you there." They ended up going straight to prison. And that's where they took him, not to the airport, but to
Oh,
prison. And I think that story is incredibly strange because out of all the people that you would call to help you move something that you're stealing, you're gonna call the cops first? I mean, come
yeah.
on,
Yeah.
where is the logic in that? But That
Well,
one is
Art Bell did something like that on his show where it was like the dumbest. I forget what he called it, but yeah, that's less strange and more just dumb. You know what I mean? So dumb headlines or something like that. It's like, come on, you know? Uh, yeah, very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, no, it's really weird, but looking at something that also strange but really incredible was the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, receiving those images as well. We had I can't remember when this was, but we had President Joe Biden with all of his people, his yeah, where they released the very first images from the James Webb Space Telescope, which were of our galaxy. With
Yeah,
this particular telescope, what's so incredible about it is that not only can it travel farther than any other telescope, but it can look farther in time than any other telescope as well. And some of the images that have been released so far, believed by astronomers, are impeccable. They're beautiful, they're awe-inspiring compared to the ones that we've received previously from these other telescopes. Also, so one of the this is the most expensive telescope that took so many months to launch. Getting images took another handful of months. Um, but it is something that I think we need to be really interested in, at least in my opinion, is
right.
looking at the exploration of space, looking at all of the future missions that are to come, especially with the new one launched by the European Space Agency, excuse me, where they're going to be exploring not only Jupiter, but Jupiter's moons as well, which are believed to not only harbor water like oceans, but if they're able to harbor oceans, it's very potential that they could also harbor life as well. So there's a lot of bets being placed on this new mission that's going to launch in 2023. And if you're a betting man, Dino, you should bet some money that they're gonna find some life at some point, but it won't reach there until 2026, I believe. But it's through these pieces of information, it is through these exploration missions
Yeah,
that give us an understanding of our universe so much more than what's just happening here on our planet. And it is with that that makes us question, is there life out there? And if so, how close is it to planet Earth? And then we can also look at the concepts of the afterlife as well, of other dimensions. Right now, a really popular conversation, I would say, in the UFO field, and if you're speaking to those of a high status, are the conversation of interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, and things like this, where it's not just you're not dealing just with extraterrestrials, those that are not from this earth, but also from other dimensions. And we
right.
could potentially even bring religion into this. Are angels and demons interdimensionals because they're not from here and they're from heaven or hell? Are those dimensions?
Yeah.
Right? So you can get into this whole heated conversation for weeks, not even
Oh
hours,
yeah.
but for
Oh,
weeks on this. And once again, I'm bringing up all of these different conversations, but they're all
connected.
interconnected.
Yes, yes. No, 100%. Like you bring up, oh geez, where do I go? Because you just bring up three different topics that I
Exactly.
would love to go with you because you talk about heaven and hell. I mean, listen, first of all, your knowledge is very, very good.
Yeah.
So I have to, you know, commend you on your knowledge. You've probably interviewed so many people and collected so much data that you're very very knowledgeable. And but the whole concept of heaven and hell, maybe possibly being interdimensional, but again, that goes into religion because if you're going to talk about that, you're going to talk about God and what is all that. But
Exactly.
we'll keep that aside for a bit. Um, the fallen angels, you know, I always think it's very intriguing the topic because there is a connection, I believe, in the vampire lore and
Mhm.
fallen angels because uh, the description of the fallen angels did you see Midnight Mass on Netflix? Did you get to see
I
that
did
series?
not. I haven't
Oh, you
seen
got to
it.
watch that, Christina. anyways, it talks about the fallen angels in the Bible, and it starts out with Genesis, and it goes through each part of the book, and throughout there's also hints of vampires. And your thoughts on that? Do you have any thoughts? Have you not really dove into that too much?
So I between you and me, don't tell anybody, but I love the conversation about religion. When I first started university, I actually wanted to get a degree in religious studies. Unfortunately, my university didn't provide it, so I just took one class in it.
Mhm.
And it is something that I thoroughly enjoy, all religions across the entire planet. I am a practitioner of Buddhism. I practice Mahayana Buddhism, which can
Nice.
be classified as a religion or a philosophy, depending on your perspective on it and how far you want to go with it. But I grew up Catholic, coming from a very strict Latin household. So I have always had this background in religion. My really good friend when I was a child was an Orthodox Jew. So I've been surrounded by all of it. But looking at this conversation, I had 2 doctors on my show, doctors as in PhDs in the research of Catholicism very specifically. One
Mhm.
of them being Paul Thigpen, another one being Dr. Diana Pasulka.
Okay.
Both of them are incredibly knowledgeable. And I asked them this question, both of them, and I said, when we're dealing with religion, there are so many people in the UFO field and those outside of the field that would state, if we got disclosure, if aliens came to visit, people's religions would crumble, their lives would fall apart.
Uh, the
And
big question. Yeah, yeah, I
right.
got.
And so because then it will also make them question God and things like this. And I'm like, I need to ask this question to those that have been researching the books. And I've spoken to also a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they said, "An argument is total BS, and let me tell you why. It
Okay.
is it is because they believe in angels, demons, faith, when I mean faith, I mean, like, miracles and things like this, that if we were being visited by extraterrestrials and we got that information, it would only strengthen their faith more so than make it crumble." And I'm like, huh, that's really interesting. And it goes to show, like you had mentioned at the beginning, you need to do your research. Just don't listen to people. Ask the questions yourselves and ask people that are experts in that field. don't
Yeah.
don't listen to anybody else. And they said, no, from the research that I've done, that's not true. And I think that we need to bring that aspect of religion into these conversations. While others might find that a bit of taboo, which I can understand, it
Right.
also gives people a different perspective, because with all of these ancient scriptures, because we know that these religions are old, so old, with incredible stories. And some of these stories are sprinkled with extraterrestrial visitation, which we could
Exactly.
classify as angels and demons and things like this.
Yes, exactly. And that's the one thing that's always bothered me about the idea that people say, even Art Bell would say this all the time, that the minute they disclosure happens, or if an alien UFO lands on, say, the White House lawn, people would freak out. They would
Yeah.
totally, I mean, it would just be, riots in the streets and whatever else, people killing themselves and all that stuff. Uh, I'm like, I don't see that happening. I would see, and especially like you said, all these stories touched on in the Bible or in other religious books also. And I would think people would be intrigued. I don't think the planet would go into chaos. That's just me. I mean,
Well, it depends on how that information is portrayed, because it is through the mainstream media that causes people panic,
well, yeah,
and
unless
also the
they come out
unknown
with
as
like,
well.
yeah, unless they come out with, these missiles and these laser,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I think you'll know if it's a bad thing or not. I think you'd know right
Well,
off
I
the bat.
mean I mean, in the Twilight show, How to Surf Man, they had no idea until they got onto the ship.
That's true, but yeah. So that's in the mind of people too, right? So who knows?
It is
So
true. But then we can also look into the Hindu scriptures, the Sanskrit, where they spoke about Vimanas, which researchers have classified to be like flying temples, flying palaces.
yeah,
And that in itself sounds like an extraterrestrial craft, if you ask
right.
me, or if you ask anyone that's done this research. And
Yeah,
it goes to show that that's even another ancient story from a holy scripture that talks about these things. So people that supposedly people that have a religious foundation are
yeah,
going to be more knowledgeable in this conversation in the aspect of adapting to disclosure if we were to receive it, more so than those that are not exposed to these conversations or that religious aspect to it.
yeah. No, it's very interesting topic to touch on. We might as well throw Bigfoot and cryptids in there. Why
Why
not?
not?
I mean, it's what people love. They love to hear about it, even though we know there's sightings every day across the globe. But where's the evidence? And I would say that there is evidence that people get hair samples. It comes back primate, unknown. It gets stored away, zipped in bags. Even bones, they get zipped in bags, put away in museums and other places that we just don't know of. The minute something credible or evidence comes to the surface, it's put away. We don't get to know it. So, anyways, that's my thought process behind it. But what are your thoughts on let's just say Bigfoot? Because I also think it could be interdimensional too. Uh,
No,
Tracks that
I
stopped in the snow. Boom. Where did it go? Where'd it go? So, anyways,
I've heard those stories and I find them fascinating. I will state, once again, between you and me, when I first heard about I was saying dinosaurs, but when I first heard about Bigfoot, because think about your name and just anyway,
well, you said Dino. The name's Dino. You said it right earlier, but
Dino.
then you
See,
went
now
Dino.
I'm saying Dino. That's it's my brain, but Dinos. Thank you.
That's all right.
But when I first came across Bigfoot, I'm like, oh, another hairy man, another cryptid. Oh, this is so boring. I know
Yeah.
it sounds so terrible. But as I began doing research and I heard more stories about tracks going and then stopping out of nowhere, stories of Bigfoot supposedly entering and exiting out of trees, creating portals, and Bigfoot's being seen next to UFOs. So, like a UFO sighting and then a Bigfoot sighting back to back by witnesses.
Right.
That's when I began to get really interested in this conversation. And I'm like, okay, here's another connection. You're dealing with cryptids and UFOs. There's a convergence there. I need to look more into this. And I have spoken to really like less than a handful of Bigfoot researchers, but one in particular that I found her research fascinating is Emily Fleur. She
Mhm.
is one of the youngest Bigfoot researchers that I've interacted with. She's in her 20s, so she is the future of the conversation. And what I learned from her was she's done extensive boots on the ground investigations along with being an armchair researcher such as myself. And she stated that when looking at Bigfoot, she in particular is looking at the tangible evidence, looking at the hair samples, looking at the scat if possible.
Mhm.
And what she's found is, like you had mentioned, Dino, is that the hair samples that she comes across or that her teammate members come across, or even the is the Olympus or the Olympic UFO research group, Bigfoot research group, is
Right.
that the hair samples that are found and given to people to look into, it comes out as unknown or very close to primate when there aren't any monkeys in that area. So it's
Right.
almost impossible for that hair to be collected and found to be primate. What's
Exactly.
also interesting is how to safely and properly collect evidence that people don't talk about. You cannot touch the evidence, but you also can't just have any type of gloves that you find in your backpack that are blue and that they look like doctor gloves. They have to be they
Yeah.
have to be sterile on the inside and outside. And that in itself, a lot of mistakes are made when you don't have that information, because then you're contaminating the evidence, and then your evidence is going to be totally skewed, which
Right.
a lot of people don't know about, a lot of people don't talk about, and it's really important information to know.
Yes, 100%. So, who the heck knows? It could be interdimensional. We just don't know. They could be evading us through underground tunnels. Uh, we don't
That's
know.
right. No, and there seems to be different types of Bigfoot as well. There are
Right.
some that supposedly are tangible. There could be others that are interdimensionals. And there have been stories of extraterrestrials using Bigfoot as slaves, very much like the Greys, where there have been contactees that have stated that Greys are just robotic type creatures that are used by multiple races.
Mm,
And could Bigfoot be the same? Or is it different types, the same way that we have different types of races of humans here on planet Earth? We
that's what it
don't we
seems.
don't have the answers, but there's a handful of people that are doing extensive research to look for those answers. But that's why for the time being they are classified as cryptids. But let me tell you this, platypuses,
Yes.
they were
Love them.
believed. Oh, I mean, Phineas and Ferb, that's where I got it.
Right.
But they were believed to be cryptids, because how can a mammal lay eggs but still be poisonous and still have all of these weird features and be real? And
Yeah.
it wasn't until the early 1800s, late 1700s, where a few colonists came across these creatures, and they're like, okay, so all of these legends were true, and that's how it became documented. Could the same thing happen for Bigfoot? Absolutely. But there's always that argument of Bigfoot isn't real because no bodies have been found, no bones have been found, no DNA has been found. But what if, and this is a conversation that I've had with several Bigfoot researchers privately, what if they're very much like humans and they bury the dead the way that we do? And that's why we haven't found them yet. Is that a
Right.
possibility? Maybe. And they're possibly going to decompose a little bit faster than we do because they don't embalm them.
Listen, it's hard to find bones of bears or wolves or other types of animals because they decompose too quickly, even the bones. So that's very legitimate reason. Um, what were you saying? Chupacabras. Somebody said that, but before that, there was also somebody that I talked to about the whole Bigfoot thing. Really went in depth about Bigfoot and saying that the extraterrestrials they were somewhat like experiments, and they would project the image of these creatures onto the ground. Which is why they would kind of disappear. And it's kind of all this kind of mind game and experimenting with the human species. I can't remember the person's name, but that was one hypothesis of the whole Bigfoot theory. But anyways, Chupacabra, very another confusing thing. It happened real quick there, which is why I believed it could possibly have been something that was released out of an experimental facility down there, and got loose. But then they started showing these pictures of mangy dogs, and I'm like going, that has
Right.
nothing to do. Doesn't look anything like the chupacabra that we were told about at first. Your thoughts on that?
So I first got exposed to the story of Chupacabra actually from Scooby Doo. And that's how
Sorry,
it.
Scoob.
'Cause they did a whole episode on when they had gone to Mexico
Yeah.
and they were followed by a chupacabra. Prior to that, I wasn't familiar with that knowledge. It's not prevalent in the Venezuelan culture from what I grew up in. So I'm
Mm,
like, "Oh, what is this cryptid? This sounds so silly." But as I began doing research when I got older, I was like, "Okay, there's something to this. Is it just a dog that has some type of disease and starts scratching himself where he has little fur and he's like
yeah.
all crazy?" There's a lot of, there's a lot of people stating yes, but what I've noticed with Chupacabra is that the depictions and the descriptions have consistently changed. There's a bunch of different types of depictions of what the chupacabra potentially looks like. There are some where it has like these little spikes on its back. There are
Yeah.
some where it looks like a really sickly dog, but it's a chupacabra. There are and there's all these different types of minor details, but they're all incredibly important when doing the research on them because every single little detail could totally change its appearance, therefore change it from being a totally different creature or cryptid. So for myself, I find it something that I need to do more research on. It is something that I think is really interesting because there is that it's more of a modern legend
Yeah.
than these other cryptids that have been told throughout time. But this one is new, and you're like, huh, I want to
Yeah.
know more about this. But then the story stopped.
Yep.
Everything everything just paused. And then you're like, oh, did these
Okay.
exist? Were they just dogs? Were they some type of scientific experiment? You have all these questions in your mind. But if we were still getting sightings, it would we would be having a different conversation right now.
Right, right. No, totally agree. Which is why that's something that's going to pass on, I think, into just not urban legend, but maybe some sort of urban legend or something along those lines. But I mean, that also goes into. I mean, Mothman's a whole different ball game, but
Oh yeah.
that was something that kind of just happened, and then that kind of slowly disappeared. Even though there are similar sightings every now and then, still in the area. But yeah, I mean, thoughts on the Mothman?
The Mothman is a case that I've always found interesting. I've done very basic research on
Okay.
it because I am a UFO researcher. That's what I
Right.
focus on. But looking at cryptids, it's something that I'm beginning to get into. I know the basic story of Mothman, and how there were quite a few sightings. Then you have the Mothman curse, where this bridge broke because it landed on it. People died, sadly,
Yeah.
and then
Right.
the sighting stopped afterward.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to the chupacabra story. You had all these sightings and then it stopped. Was it something strange? Is it an extraterrestrial potentially as well? Was it just a science experiment? Did it die and there was only one? Or is there a family of Mothmen? Where did they go? How did they reproduce so that we could put them in a lab and make more, which is a terrible mentality, but people have that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And so when looking at this story, what's interesting about it is its wingspan, its glowing red eyes, and it's impacted the town so much that they do a Mothman festival every single year. And this last year in 2022 was their biggest festival yet with the most attendance, which I
Mhm.
find really exciting that people are interested in this story. They want to know more about it, but it's unfortunate that we haven't really received any sightings in the last few decades.
Right, exactly. Very, very interesting. It's something that, again, it's going down in history. It's got a festival every year, so it's definitely a. I love the story. I love everything
Yeah.
about it. But let me. We are getting to the bottom of the hour, and I kind of want to round this out since you are a UFO girl. Um, what is the state? You've interviewed a lot of people. You've done a lot of research. What is the state of ufology right now? Are we seeing the same amount of sightings, incidents? Are there more? Are there less? What's your take on 2022? And we're just going into 2023. So
So in 2022 is where we received some of the most sightings by pilots and military officials. President Joe Biden just signed a bill. Out of the $8 billion, there's going to be a percentage that is going to go to UFO witness congressional hearings, which is a really big deal, meaning that the
huh.
whistleblowers that come out and speak to Congress will not be penalized, meaning that people that are in the military that don't have, too strict of NDAs to my understanding, they'll be able to speak about their encounters. Now, they will not be able to speak about, of course, private programs and who they worked for and things like that, but their personal sightings they will be able to disclose. A really good example of this is Robert Salas. He encountered the UFO in Maelstrom, Montana in 1967, I believe. And with that case in particular, for those that aren't familiar with it, when he was working at that Air Force base and they were testing missiles during that time frame, the supposedly extraterrestrials, they deactivated the intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Right.
And this was a consistent thing that happened over and over again. We've seen that across the world. We've seen it in Montana. We've seen it in California. We've seen it even in Russia a few years back.
Yeah.
So this is something that people that have encountered things like that will be able to speak about to Congress. In May, we received a UFO congressional hearing, which was the first in 55 years, where we had two men from the AOI MSG. Do not ask me to say all of those letters into
That's
words
all
because it is long,
right.
but they publicly spoke about kind of the information that they collected during their time researching UFOs in the last few years. Did they really disclose anything? No. But it was a really big deal that they publicly came out. You can find the video online of the congressional hearing that took place in May talking about this. You had congressmen asking tough questions, one in particular being Gallagher, who asked about the Maelstrom Air Force Base, who asked about Project Blue Book as well. But presently, in 2022, 2023, we've received some of the most cases and sightings by pilots and military officials. 2022 was a really, really hot year for UFO news because prior to that, we received the UAP preliminary report in June of 2021, where the Pentagon said every 6 months we will give you a UFO report. Did we receive that? No, we did not, but they said that we would get it. Then we got the hearing in 2022. We got a lot of conversations regarding that. So for 2023, we're supposedly supposed to get UFO witness hearings and hopefully another UAP report that we were supposedly promised on October 31st of 2022, yet we have not received it.
Wow. Okay. I find that interesting. I did not know that that bill passed. And that should open the door big time for UFO researchers to reach out to these people and have them state on the record what they've seen. So, or just to come forward. So, I hope some good comes of that because that's been a big thing in the past when it comes to UFO sightings. So,
It has. It has. So hopefully it's going to be another hot year for news. But I would like to state before we end today's show
yeah.
is I truly believe that we're going to receive disclosure from the people and not from the government.
Uh, Gotcha. I probably agree with you 100%, really. Geek Strong, what's going on? Crystal Prison, has the guest seen UFOs? You haven't seen a UFO though, right, Christina?
I have had a UFO sighting. It isn't one that I like to talk about too much merely because it hasn't been one that I've fully understood, but it took place a few years ago on my trip to India. I saw a UFO that was semi-organic, semi-nuts and bolts, and then it came kind of close to myself and a group of people, and then it flew away with another two UFOs.
Okay. Well, so that's a UFO sighting. So she did. So there you
Yeah.
go. Wow. Connie Clary knew it passed. Listen, Connie, I'm so darn busy that I wasn't keeping up with that, which I should, but
Oh, it was just recent. Like this is really recent information. I think it came out like maybe 10 days ago. So don't
okay.
even sweat it. Yeah.
Okay, no, sounds good. So, um, you have a show Thursday.
Mhm.
What's your line? Like a YouTube channel, when can they expect to see Cristina talk on her channel?
Well, first, you can find me on YouTube under my name, Cristina Gomez. There is no H in Cristina, but you can also find everything on my website at strangeparadigms.com. I do a live show every single Thursday and Friday. Thursday at 2:30 p.m. PST and Friday at 3 p.m. PST. And I used to do a show every single Tuesday, but now since this is my final year in university, it's the most intense. So I'll only be doing shifting the paradigm maybe once or twice a month as an interview format show. I also post YouTube shorts every single day, which you can find on my website or on YouTube. And I also have another show called The Unknown Zone, which is a short 8 to 15 minute video on a very specific topic as well.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. Thank you. And again, that link, well, Dave Plouffe just put it in the chat right there. Thank you, Dave Plouffe. Follow that and check everything out on her website, but also check out the YouTube channel. I think that's important that people check that out for sure. Thank you, Cristina, for coming on here
Thank
and talking
you.
to me. Really appreciated it. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was a good time. I'm going to
Ooh,
put you. Oh, well, listen, yeah, everybody seemed to like it in the chat too and all that. But I would love to have you back on again. We'll talk down the road. I know
absolutely.
you're a busy woman, so who knows? We'll see. But I'm going to put you off to the side. I'm going to end the show and just hold on maybe 1 second.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Talk to you in a few, Cristina. So there you go. That's Cristina Gomez. Definitely check out the link below. Thank you, Dave Plouffe. As always, I'm going to get ready for the overnight tonight, you guys. We got a good Broadway is my beat all night long tonight. Check out whatever is posted on the channel page.